Serious, people who went missing. What happened? I was at a college house party. I went there with several friends. I didn't have a cell phone yet, managed to hold out until 2004. Our dorm rooms came with landlines at the time. I ended up going home with a guy and hooking up with him. Woke up the next day, checked my email on his computer, and found a ton of frantic emails from my friends. They actually thought that I'd been abducted, roofied or killed myself. I was very depressed at the time. They filed a missing person report on me with campus security and several friends were searching for me in the woods. TLDR, my friends thought it was more likely that I'd gotten kidnapped than gotten laid. Campus PD here, the number of these cases is too damn high. More than half of missing person reports end up with the victim being at a partner's house because their friends/roommates thought the same thing. You're not alone. Seriously though, don't be afraid to report shut to the police on the off chance it does become a legitimate kidnapping. I went sleepwalking one night when I was 10 years old, unlocked the front door, and went for a stroll through the neighborhood. I woke up a few hours later in the middle of the street, barefooted, in a cul-de-sac I've never been in before. Scared the bejesus out of me. Ended up running through the streets until I found my way back home. My parents had been shutting bricks looking all over for me. They put a lock on my door after that, so I couldn't go for any more midnight strolls. My cousin once disappeared while sleepwalking. Her parents woke up in the night and she wasn't in bed. They searched the streets for her but nothing, so they eventually called the police. The police asked them if they had checked inside the house. They hadn't. She had fallen asleep in the hall closet. I was hiking to see the volcanic eruption back in 2010, the one before all the grounded flights. On the way back I got separated from my group. We were about 8 to 10, one of which was a very good friend of mine. Anyway, I tend to walk pretty fast, especially on my way down from a mountain. This was in March in Iceland, so it gets dark pretty soon and fast. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have a torch on me, and in maybe half an hour everything went pitch black. I had chosen to walk the same path as the one I went up. This was extremely stupid of me as that path was about 5 meters away from a 15-meter drop into a canyon. Not only that, but the path was beside a waterfall. Waterfalls tend to have a lot of mist coming from them. Said mist goes onto the path, and because this is March in Iceland, and on a mountain it's about -5°C without wind chill, that mist turns to basically an ice skating rink on a 45-degree angle. That was an experience. I had been lost for about 5 hours. I didn't turn up until I got down from the mountain. But I was one of 20 that got lost that Saturday, 2 of whom died. Icelandic SAR groups were quite busy that time. My high school, American, football team had an away game in a somewhat sketchy city. Bus took the team back to high school afterwards. I was too young to drive, and I was grounded, and had my phone taken away. I waited at the school for an hour and a half, but my parents never came to pick me up. So I started the 4-mile walk back to my house carrying all my pads and school books. While I was walking back my mom showed up, and I wasn't there. She panicked and found the coach and told him. My coach sent a group text to the entire team asking if anyone knew where I was. Came to school the next day and everyone thought I had missed the bus and gotten lost. It ended up being a team joke for the rest of the year. Bonus, my parents never took my phone away again. It was winter break of my freshman year of college. I had just gotten dumped. I was depressed. I just wanted to be alone. I had a decent amount of money, so I rented an extended stay hotel room for 2 weeks, bought enough food and supplies for 2 weeks, shut off my cell phone, and didn't go outside for 2 weeks. When I returned home my family yelled at me for several hours, and I had received over 200 phone calls and over 500 text messages. 10 out of 10 would highly recommend. I probably won't recommend this unless you hate your family. My sister's friend went missing for 2 or 3 weeks and his family went through hell. In his defense, he was actually dead. Pretty selfish of him, really. I don't know. I lost 10 months after I turned 18. I went out to get some coffee around 6 in the morning from the convenience store down the road. I was deeply depressed and hadn't been sleeping a lot. I was also drinking like it was my job. My family had been broken and in child services for years. We had finally got everything back together and we were a family again. My father was gone for good this time. I guess I just snapped. I went out and it was the last anybody saw of me for months. I can tell you nothing about where I went or what I did. It actually bothers me deeply when I try to think about it. It's just a gap. I woke up next to some train tracks off in the woods a bit. I walked along and found a convenience store with a payphone. I had about $3,000 in my pocket, a phone number on a matchbook, cigarettes and no wallet or ID. I had no idea where I was or really who I was. I called the number and a guy answered. I asked who it was and he didn't answer for a minute. Then he just said "Salam Black, is that you man?" He told me his name was Matt and we were friends and the fact that I was at the convenience store near my house. He came and got me and took me home. My mother took me to doctors and I ended up at a shrink too. They have no real idea what happened other than some kind of break. Mental issues do run in the family. I actually don't talk about what happened ever. Once in a while my brother or sister will ask if I remember what happened, but I still don't. It's been 20 years and still nothing. As a teenager, I was drinking at a party in a small country town. At maybe around 2 AM, once everyone had left, I went to sleep in the lunchroom, along with my 3 best friends. No one else was in the house. I woke up in the morning as the sun was rising, so maybe 6 AM, in a phone box a few towns over, wearing no shoes. My walk back to the house took well over an hour, not sure the exact time, but was a really long way on foot, and upon returning I found my phone smashed up on the road by the house. My friends were all inside freaking out, calling their mums and stuff, and began screaming at me when they noticed I was back, demanding I tell them where the frick I was. I have absolutely no memory of it all, but assuming that I went for a massive drunken wander. BRB, Googling statute of limitations. K, we're good. When I was 16 I stole $5,000 and ran away to New Orleans. Before Katrina when it was still fun. I'm old. Good times were had. Was 2 to 3 years old. At the beach with dad and bro, on a camping trip. Just started walking around picking up bird feathers. My dad and bro and the rest of the people we were camping with went back to camp. I just kept picking up feathers. After a while my dad realized he forgot me and went back to the beach in a panic and found me with a large amount of feathers in my hands. I didn't so much go missing as much as got forgotten. One time I lost my dad in the supermarket and was freaking out. I didn't know what to do, so I sat next to some cornflake boxes and started sobbing. I created so many scenarios in my head that nobody would find me, that I would have to live under bridges and abandoned houses and eat dead rats and bugs to survive. I was 8. After 5 minutes my dad passes by with a shopping cart and goes, "WTF are you doing? Your mom called, we need to pick up some milk." When I was in 4th grade, the YMCA bus would pick me up after school and take me to the Y. My parents would pick me up there after they got off work. One day my friend invited me over to her house after school, and that sounded infinitely better than going to the Y, so I agreed. I asked her mom to take me home around 6, which was when my parents usually got home, so I figured it would be fine. We pulled up to my house and there were 2 cop cars in the driveway. Duck. Go inside. Parents are crying and have a bunch of pictures of me spread out on the coffee table. Obviously the YMCA had called my parents when they couldn't find me after school. My parents had no idea where else I might be and were justifiably freaking out. Oopsie daisy. I had a 12-day period of dissociative amnesia while I was in the USAF. I was doing laundry one Sunday night while waiting to start extra cleaning duty. I woke up 12 days later to my supervisor shaking me awake in my dorm room. No one saw me for those 12 days. No one heard from me. I was not a recluse. I was extremely outgoing and easily noticed. How I vanished for 12 days is amazing. I was about 6 years old. One day I was playing outside. There's a petting zoo about 4 kilometers away from where we lived, and I guess I decided to go there. So I did, by myself, barefooted, in my pajamas. When I got there the manager found out I was alone and had reached my parents by phone. I don't actually remember much of it, but it's pretty hilarious. This reinforces my belief that children are basically just tiny drunk people. So, back when I was in Boy Scouts, my troop lost me. Twice. In the same night. While I was still in my tent. This is not an exaggeration. The story is thus, we were at Camp Decorah in Iowa. We had the idea to go and perform a raid on the counselor's tent/cabins. I, however, was feeling ill, so I specifically said I'm not feeling well, I'm going to sleep. They acknowledged this, expressed regret that I was not coming along, and went to have their fun. They have their fun. They retreat into the woodline. Then they take a head count. I'm not in the head count. They expect me to be in the head count because they forgot. So, now, there is a missing camper. The entire camp is set to searching for me. Sometime during this, a guy from my troop decides to, get this, check the tents. I'm in my tent, as I should be. So he goes to report that I'm found. I go to the bathroom during this time. Someone comes back to the camp and checks my tent. I'm in the bathroom, so I'm not in my tent. I'm now missing again. I get found sooner this time. When I was 4 I got lost in a city and was rescued by what my dad thought was a gang. We had dinner in Chinatown with another family. 5 kids in all. Crossing the street after dinner, we were holding hands in a big chain. My oldest sibling let go. When the light changed and everyone crossed, I stayed on the sidewalk. I was looking through a window into a barber shop where some huge guy was having his head shaved. Can still picture the scene. When I finally looked around, everyone was gone. I started to cry. A group of teenagers approached and asked if I was lost. I said yes. A tall kid hoisted me into his shoulders and started down the block. Other kids split up and went in different directions. We rounded a corner and I saw my dad. He turned white and ran toward us. The kid lowered me to the ground. A few other kids were there. They stood around awkwardly while the tall kid explained what happened to my dad. My dad, not a demonstrative guy, flung himself at the kid and hugged him. My mom appeared and picked me up. Years later my dad told me he saw the same group of kids hanging around when he first parked in the city that evening and was suspicious that they were a gang. He was embarrassed and tried to be less judgmental after that. Wish I could thank those guys. This was a long time ago. Similar story. I was at the zoo with my parents. They were very opinionated against black people. I was like 3 at the time, so I couldn't tell, but they told me that they were. Anyways, I saw a big slide that swirled around and looked like a snake. We call it the snake slide and decided that I wanted to go there. My parents were talking next to me, so they didn't notice I left. I got completely lost on the way to the snake slide. When my parents found me, I was with a big black lady who had been walking me all over the park trying to find my parents. They both gave her a giant hug, and it completely changed their views about black people. It's nice to see false beliefs crushed by kindness. Damn white people, dropping their kids all over the place.